now crossing to the Royal Empire Society's dinner at Sydney, which is being held simultaneously with similar functions in all the capital cities of Australia and New Zealand. The chairman of this dinner, spread over the southern seas, is Sir Hugh Denison, KBE.
Thus, the stage was set in 1933 for a novel radio propaganda experiment designed to stimulate patriotism throughout Australia and the Empire. The annual banquet of the Royal Empire Society was held at the Wentworth Hotel. But on this occasion, the message was carried by radio and landline simultaneously to all Empire countries and into homes throughout Australia. First speaker was the head of one of Australia's largest retail organisations, Charles Lloyd Jones.
Listeners near and far, kith and kin, I extend to you a greeting of goodwill and feel honoured the privilege of responding to the toast, United Empire.
Now we will ask E.T. Fisk, Esquire, Chairman and Managing Director of Amalgamated Wireless Australasia Limited, to respond to the toast, Workers in the Empire's Cause.
On behalf of the workers in the Empire cause, I thank you for your toast. It has been said that the bonds of empire are invisible. You have had a demonstration, but not an illustration of that this evening.
After a series of speeches extolling the monarchy and stressing the need for the tightening of the bonds of empire, the Great Hall at the university reverberated to the singing of patriotic songs, culminating in an 80-voice choir presenting a cantata, Call of the Southern Seas, composed and conducted by Alfred Hill. This Round Australia broadcast was one of a number of important developments in the use of radio that year. Sir Charles Kingsford Smith added another chapter to his illustrious record. His old bus, the Southern Cross, once again touched down at Mascot Aerodrome, Sydney, having spanned the Tasman for the 4th time. On this trip, Smithy proved conclusively that communication could be maintained successfully by radio telephony on transoceanic flights.
On the occasion of the 4th successful crossing of the Tasman Sea by the Southern Cross, I would just like to say how happy I am to be home again, and I'd also like to pay a tribute to the wonderful work by the fellows who helped me across and made my job very easy. The flight was in no way remarkable except for the fact that this was the first occasion on which transoceanic telephony has been experimented with from the air, and it's very gratifying to myself and to Mrs. Phillips that it was so successful. I would also like to say, last but not least, that the old Southern Cross herself is fit for many, many thousands of miles yet, and she carried us across in perfect safety in the way that she always does.
No sooner had Smithy completed his reports on this invaluable experiment than he was off to England once again. And before the end of the year, he was winging his way back in a Percival Gull to establish a new England-Australia solo record of 7 days, 4 hours. As he touched down at Brisbane, all Australia was asking, what will Smithy do next? What more can he do? The inimitable air ace was the recipient of yet another tumultuous welcome, and some of the cheers on this triumphant ride through Brisbane were for his famous co-pilot on many pioneering flights, Charles Ulm, here seen seated alongside the driver. The crowd remembered the stirring achievement of these two men in the old bus when they made the first east-west crossing of the Pacific Ocean, which included a 2,740 nautical mile hop between Honolulu and Fiji, the longest non-stop flight on record up to that time, at 100 miles an hour. In Sydney, to load wheat for England, the famous Finnish barque Palmyr, with masts towering 180 feet above her deck and clearance under the Sydney Harbour Bridge at high water 172 feet 6 inches, Palmyr was forced to anchor off Point Piper for a week, while crewmen removed parts of the topmasts. The final safety margin between masts and bridge, just 4 feet. There were no bridge problems for a flotilla of 5 Royal Navy destroyers when they sailed through Sydney Heads, a gift from the British government to replace 5 older models handed over soon after World War I. HMAS Stuart led the run up the harbour, followed by Vampire, Voyager, Vendetta and Waterhen. Because of the abandonment of recruiting and drastic cutting of service personnel, 2 of the 5 were to be immediately placed on reserve, together with the aircraft carrier Albatross and 2 of our 4 cruisers. A striking example of the deficiency in trained manpower in all the armed services. But such a deplorable situation did not dampen public enthusiasm in Melbourne when our depleted naval ranks headed celebrations to mark the 128th anniversary of the Battle of Trafalgar. Memories were revived of that famous day when Lord Nelson inflicted a crushing defeat on the French and Spanish fleets off Cape Trafalgar. Trafalgar Day in Australia has been replaced by Navy Day, celebrating the arrival of the first Royal Australian Navy ships in Sydney Harbour on October 4th, 1913. An old sea battle could not have been further from the minds of these men of the Australian Field Artillery, keeping in touch at an 18th Brigade camp at Liverpool, New South Wales. They fired guns, but basically were horsemen. And as in those days horses provided the power to move the guns, their grooming, their feed was the best. And spit and polish was just as necessary on the harness as on the men's Sam Brown belts. Napoleon said, "An army marches on its stomach." But this display of a few hundred cavalry and artillerymen, although meticulous, served only to stress the depths of inadequacy into which the army had fallen as the result of the penny-pinching financial policy which the federal government had been forced into by the Depression. In 1929, the then Governor of Victoria, Lord Somers, established at Western Port a holiday camp for the youth of Melbourne. A 4-square program, he termed it, to bring together the young men of all classes to develop them not only physically, but also mentally, spiritually and socially. Lord Somers attended each camp until his duties as acting Governor-General cancelled his holiday. And so this following year, he was penalised for his absence by an on-the-spot judge and jury, composed not of his peers, but his juniors.
But I was here. How are you here? In a battle of spirits.
It was all in good fun, a ceremony rounded off by our Lord and his lads singing the rousing Camp Summers song of 1933.
Sing a